My son and his newly married wife went to dinner at an upscale restaurant, leaving me at home with the new housekeeper they'd just hired a few weeks before. The moment their car disappeared from sight, she whispered something to me that left me speechless. "Don't touch the soup in the refrigerator. That's not food. It's medication designed to make you lose your mind." In that single moment, everything I believed about my family shattered like glass. Welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into this gripping tale, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment sharing your own experiences or thoughts. Quick disclaimer. This story blends fictional narrative with factual information about elder abuse. The characters are created for storytelling, but the message about protecting vulnerable seniors is deeply important and true. The sun had already dropped behind the buildings, leaving Fifth Avenue bathed in that peculiar shade of twilight that only Manhattan knows. I sat in the library, my library with the evening edition of the Times folded in my lap, waiting for nothing in particular. At 61, I'd learned that waiting was sometimes the best part of living. No drama, no complications, just the soft hum of the city beyond these walls. Mrs. Sterling. I looked up from the paper. Laura stood in the doorway, her posture perfectly composed, her dark hair pulled back so severely it seemed to erase her face. She'd been with us for exactly 2 weeks, hired through an agency Daniel had recommended. The best in the city, he'd said. She was efficient, invisible in that way. Good help should be quiet, reliable, and utterly forgettable. Yes, Laura. I set the newspaper aside, gesturing for her to come in. She stepped forward with measured movements, each one deliberate. "I wanted to confirm tomorrow's schedule. Your calendar indicated a doctor's appointment in the morning, but I wanted to verify the—" "Tomorrow is fine, dear," I said, offering what I hoped was a warm smile. "How are you settling in 2 weeks now, correct?" Laura paused. For just a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. A hesitation. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the only gesture I'd seen from her that seemed remotely human. "Yes, 2 weeks. It's been illuminating." Illuminating. What an odd word choice for a tutor. Most people would say nice or pleasant, not illuminating. I heard the front door open downstairs, the distinct sound of Daniel's voice, then Melissa's laugh, too bright and deliberate. They were leaving for Balthazar, a restaurant in Soho where they'd been planning to spend the evening. Daniel had mentioned it at breakfast. "Just you and Laura tonight," Mother Melissa had said with that practiced smile she wore. "We'll let you two get acquainted." "They're heading out," I said more to myself than to Laura. "Yes," she replied, her eyes moving slowly around the room. Not at me around the room. Across the bookshelves, down the length of the mahogany desk, over the side table, where I kept my reading glasses and a half-empty cup of tea. Her gaze was methodical, cataloging. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "No, Mrs. Sterling." She turned back to me, her expression blank again. "Everything is exactly as I expected." That was when I first felt it, that small prickle at the back of my neck. The sense that something was profoundly out of place, not with the room, not with the evening, but with her. With the way she'd looked around my home, not with the curiosity of someone new to a space, but with the precision of someone checking boxes on a list. I didn't know it then, but Laura had already seen things I hadn't. The phone rang just as I was heading to the kitchen. Daniel's name flashed across the screen, that familiar pattern of his, always calling right before they truly settled into their evening. "Mother," he said, his voice warm but distracted. In the background, I could hear the ambient hum of Balthazar, clinking glasses, the soft murmur of other diners. "Just wanted to let you know we're going to be a bit longer than we thought." "Of course, dear," I replied, moving toward the refrigerator. "Take your time. Melissa found a wine she wants to pair with the main course, and you know how she is about these things." He laughed, that brief practiced laugh he used when he wasn't entirely comfortable. "It could be another hour, maybe longer." "That's fine. Laura and I will manage perfectly well." There was a pause, just the slightest hesitation. "How's that working out anyway, Laura?" "She's excellent," I said, glancing toward the doorway where Laura now stood, having appeared as if summoned. She held a small stack of plates. "Very efficient. Quiet. Exactly what I needed." "Good. That's good," Daniel said. Then, "We'll probably head straight to bed when we get home if that's all right. It's been a long week." "Of course." After we hung up, the house seemed to settle into a deeper quiet. I pulled together a light dinner, some salad, a bit of cheese, leftover soup from the day before. Nothing complicated. Laura helped without being asked, moving through the dining room with that same methodical precision I'd noticed earlier. She set the table for two, placed the napkins, just so adjusted the glasses to align perfectly with the edge of the plates. I found myself watching her more than eating. "This is lovely, Laura," I said, more to fill the silence than anything else. "Thank you." She looked at me. For a moment I thought she might actually respond. Truly respond, not just offer one of those clipped affirmations she'd been dispensing all evening. But she simply nodded and resumed her work. The salad was cold. The soup was warm. Neither tasted like much of anything. By 9 o'clock, the dishes were cleared and the kitchen had returned to its pristine order. I retired to the living room with a book I had no real intention of reading. The television was on in the background, some news program, the anchor's voice, a steady drone of political analysis that I couldn't quite focus on. Laura disappeared into the study where I assumed she was preparing materials for tomorrow's tutoring sessions. Or at least that's what she would have been doing if she were really a tutor. The night stretched on, long and quiet, and somehow heavy with an anticipation I couldn't quite name. I was tired. Not the kind of tired you feel in your muscles, but the kind that settles in your bones, the exhaustion of simply existing in a space where something fundamental felt wrong, where someone who claimed to be one thing seemed to be cataloging another. At 10:45, I found myself glancing at the clock more frequently. 15 minutes until 11. 15 minutes until something I didn't yet understand was supposed to happen. And somehow I knew it would. I was still in the living room when I heard her footsteps on the stairs. These weren't the quiet, careful steps she'd been taking all evening. These were purposeful, deliberate. Laura entered, and something fundamental had shifted. She'd released her hair from that severe bun. It fell past her shoulders in soft waves. More than that, her entire presence had transformed. The practiced invisibility was gone, replaced by absolute confidence. "Mrs. Sterling." She said, her voice completely different now, clear, assured. "My name is Laura Bennett. I need to tell you something very important. The next 15 minutes might be the most critical of your life." I stood up, my heart racing. "I've been following Daniel and Melissa for 2 months," Laura said, moving toward me, not casually. "I was hired by a private investigation firm to monitor their communications and financial transactions. What I discovered was a conspiracy that started the moment Melissa entered your family. 2 months, before I even knew Laura existed. I found something in your kitchen," Laura continued. "A substance in a container that matches the one Melissa uses for the soup she's been making you on Mondays. The soup you've been eating regularly." My stomach turned. "It's a medication," Laura explained. "In normal doses, it's prescribed for anxiety disorders. But in the quantities I found administered over several weeks, it creates symptoms that look exactly like early-onset dementia, confusion, memory loss, emotional instability." The room tilted. I reached for the sofa. "You're wondering how to trust me," Laura said quietly. "You don't know me. So let me prove it. You told Patricia Winters 3 weeks ago that you were worried about your memory. You mentioned forgetting where you'd put your reading glasses. You also told her, and only her, that you were having difficulty reconciling your checkbook, which frightened you, because you've always prided yourself on managing your finances." My breath caught. I'd never mentioned those things to anyone else. "Daniel mentioned those conversations to Melissa," Laura said, "and Melissa mentioned them to someone who filed a report. That report contained notes about your decline, your vulnerability. It was written by Dr. Marcus Harrison, whom you've never met." I sat down slowly. "There's more," Laura said. She pulled a small digital recorder from her jacket pocket, its red light blinking. "Everything I've told you is documented here. Conversations between Daniel and Melissa, between Melissa and the doctor, between the doctor and someone at a facility called Bridgewood Manor." She let the name sit in the air like a threat. "They want to put you there, Mrs. Sterling. They've already begun the paperwork. They've already begun poisoning your mind and body to make a case for involuntary commitment." I stared at her and something shifted inside me. Not denial, not even fear, though there was plenty of that. What I felt was a strange, clarifying sense of relief. Finally. Someone had named the thing, haunting me, the sense that something was profoundly wrong, that I was being unmade piece by piece. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would they do this?" Laura's expression softened slightly. "Because your estate is worth $5 million, Mrs. Sterling, and they need you declared incompetent to control it." Laura sat down across from me, the recorder still in her hand. "The full picture is worse than what I've already told you," she said quietly. "It requires you to understand the people you love." I nodded, bracing myself. "The soup is just the beginning," Laura continued. "The compound Melissa has been administering is an antipsychotic medication. 6 weeks of consistent administration and a person presents with memory loss, confusion, emotional instability." "By Dr. Harrison," I said. "By Dr. Harrison," Laura confirmed, "who has been paid $15,000 to sign off on a psychiatric evaluation declaring you incompetent. Once that evaluation is filed, Bridgewood Manor becomes an option. $75,000 just for initial placement." My chest tightened. "Bridgewood Manor isn't what it appears to be," Laura said. "It markets itself as an exclusive wellness facility. In reality, it's a holding ground for wealthy individuals whose families need them removed. Victor Kensington, the director, has been running this operation for 20 years. He profits from placement fees and inflated care costs." "How many?" I asked. "We've identified at least a dozen cases in the last 5 years," Laura said. "The actual number might be double that." My hands began to shake. "Now the question you're asking yourself," Laura said, "is why would Daniel agree to this? The answer is Melissa." Laura pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph. A young man, probably in his late 20s, dark-haired and smiling. "This is Jack Wilson," Laura said. "Melissa's younger brother. 30 years ago, when he was 17, he was admitted to Bridgewood Manor. His family believed he was struggling with depression." I stared at the photograph. "He died there, Mrs. Sterling. After 6 months of treatment, he took his own life. Melissa has spent 30 years investigating what really happened. According to her research, Jack was subjected to experimental pharmaceutical protocols. The facility documented none of it." The room felt suddenly cold. "Melissa didn't enter your family by accident," Laura continued. "She targeted Daniel. When she found that you were worth $5 million, she saw an opportunity not just for revenge against the institution that destroyed her family, but also for justice." "But Daniel," I said, "he wouldn't knowingly—" "Daniel doesn't know the full extent," Laura interrupted gently. "Melissa told him you were having memory problems. She positioned herself as the concerned daughter-in-law. And when he resisted, Melissa revealed her plan." Laura leaned forward. "She told him about Jack Wilson. She told him about Bridgewood Manor's history. She told him that his mother was never going to be hurt, that this was about accessing funds to expose the institution to bring it down." "He believed her," I said. "He wanted to believe her," Laura said. "He loved you, but he also loved the idea that he could use this situation to honor his sister, even though he'd never met her." Something broke inside me then. My son had agreed to have me declared incompetent. My son had allowed poison to be administered to me, but he'd done it believing he was serving justice. "We have 6 weeks," Laura said, her voice suddenly sharp with urgency. 6 weeks before Melissa schedules your psychiatric evaluation. 6 weeks before Dr. Harrison signs the papers. 6 weeks before Bridgewood Manor becomes inevitable." She stood up, and I felt the weight of those 6 weeks settle onto my shoulders. "If you go into that facility, Mrs. Sterling, I'm not sure we can get you out." Laura's fingers moved across the small recorder with practiced precision. The red light blinked, and suddenly Melissa's voice filled my living room, intimate, urgent. "Listen to me, Daniel. You have to understand what happened to Jack. You have to understand what that place did to him." There was a pause. Then Daniel's voice, hesitant, "I know, but—" "No buts," Melissa cut him off. "My brother spent 6 months in Bridgewood Manor. 6 months. And then he was gone. They destroyed him, and no one was ever held accountable." I gripped the armrest of the sofa. The next recording jumped forward in time, weeks later. Melissa's voice was different now, calmer, more strategic. "Your mother is a good woman, Daniel. That's exactly why this will work. She'll be comfortable there, safe even. We're talking about giving her the care she needs while we finally get justice. What if she doesn't want? Daniel started. She won't understand at first, Melissa said smoothly. She's already confused. The memory issues are getting worse. You told me that yourself. I felt my stomach drop. Another recording, more recent. Daniel's voice had taken on a frustrated edge. Melissa, I can't do this. It's my mother. What if she figures out what's happening? Melissa's response was ice cold. Then she figures it out later when it's already done, when we're already in control of the situation, when we have what we need. What we need, Daniel repeated. You mean the money? Of course the money, Melissa said, and I heard something shift in her tone, something honest, almost relieved that the pretense was dropping. $5 million, Daniel. $5 million that belongs to a system that destroyed my family. Don't tell me you're suddenly uncomfortable with justice. I heard Daniel breathing heavily on the recording. I'm not comfortable with lying to my mother, he said quietly. You're comfortable with her being stolen from, Melissa snapped back. You're comfortable with that institution continuing to prey on vulnerable elderly people. Is that the kind of son you want to be? The emotional whiplash was extraordinary. Melissa shifted from empathy to accusation so fluidly that I could see exactly how Daniel had been caught, how he'd been turned into a weapon against me. If your mother doesn't go to Bridgewood. Melissa continued, her voice dropping lower. Then nothing changes. Jack's death means nothing. And every day there are more Jacks. Is that what you want? No, Daniel said, and he sounded broken. No, of course not. Then we need to move forward, with or without your complete comfort. The recording clicked off. Laura reached over and stopped the device. When I looked up at her, I saw something like pity in her expression. There are 6 more weeks of recordings, Laura said quietly, all designed to slowly erode his resistance. She's very good at this, Mrs. Sterling. Manipulation is a skill, and Melissa has spent 30 years perfecting it. I wasn't angry at Daniel anymore. Or rather, I was angry, but it was a different kind of anger, the kind you feel for someone who's been victimized, even if they're also victimizing you. He sounds trapped, I said. He is trapped, Laura said. But not the way you might think. He's trapped by his own goodness, by his need to believe that what he's doing is righteous. I thought of my son, manipulated by a woman he loves, forced to choose between his mother and his conscience. Except his conscience had been weaponized against him. In the most recent recordings, Laura said he's stopped arguing, he's simply complying. That's when the trap becomes permanent. Laura set down the recorder and pulled a folder from her bag. Inside were printed documents, bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, medical records with official letterheads. She spread them across the coffee table like evidence in a courtroom. Victor Kensington runs Bridgewood Manor. Laura said, her voice carrying the precision of someone who had memorized every detail. He's been running it for 20 years. He markets it as an exclusive wellness facility. In reality, it's a revenue machine designed to extract money from families in crisis. I leaned forward, studying the papers. The first payment is $75,000 for initial placement and intake assessment, Laura continued. That's just to get your foot through the door. $75,000, I repeated the number silently. But that's nothing compared to what comes after, Laura said. She pointed to another document, a care plan filled with line items, monthly fees, medications, specialized therapies, psychiatric consultations. They bill for everything, and they inflate it. When they know a family has money, the costs mysteriously increase. How is this legal? I asked. It's not, Laura said flatly, but it's difficult to prosecute. Families are too ashamed to speak up. Residents are too sedated to advocate for themselves. And Kensington knows how to cover his tracks. She pulled out another document bearing Dr. Marcus Harrison's signature. This is what we call the linchpin, Laura said. Dr. Harrison agrees to sign a psychiatric evaluation. For that signature, he receives $15,000. It doesn't come through official channels. It's paid through a shell company that Bridgewood uses for consulting fees. $15,000 for a signature, for a lie. Dr. Harrison isn't the only one, Laura said. There's a network of doctors, social workers, care coordinators, all with financial incentives to push their patients toward Bridgewood, all with quiet arrangements with Kensington. My hands felt cold. Here's how it works, Laura said, laying out the sequence like a choreographer explaining a dance. Melissa ensures you're having memory problems. Daniel reports those problems to a concerned family member. That advisor recommends a psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Harrison conducts the evaluation and declares you incompetent. Bridgewood is presented as the only suitable option. Victor Kensington accepts your case. And suddenly I'm $75,000 poorer, I said. That's just the beginning, Laura said. Once you're inside Bridgewood, the real extraction begins. Monthly fees, medications you don't need, therapies you're never told about. Your assets are accessed through guardianship. Kensington takes a percentage of every transaction. I thought of my $5 million funneling into Victor Kensington's operation while I sat medicated and confused. But we have something they don't expect, Laura said. She tapped the documents. Every transaction leaves a trace. Every wire transfer can be tracked. Every payment to Dr. Harrison is documented. I have the evidence. I have it all. For the first time since Laura had entered my life, I felt something shift inside me. Not quite hope, not yet, but the possibility of hope. How much time do we have? I asked. The psychiatric examination is scheduled for tomorrow morning, Laura said. 10 o'clock at Lexington Avenue Medical Center. Dr. Harrison will conduct it. And if he signs that evaluation, if those papers get filed, the entire process accelerates. She looked directly at me. If we don't move tonight, Mrs. Sterling tomorrow morning will be the point of no return. Laura pulled a small object from her jacket pocket. At first I thought it was designer glasses, but when she opened the case, I understood what I was looking at. Micro camera, she said quietly. High-definition audio and video. The battery lasts 8 hours. I stared at the tiny lens embedded in the frame. My hands had started shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the weight of what came next. Tomorrow afternoon. Laura continued settling into the leather chair across from me. You'll arrive at Lexington Avenue Medical Center at 2 o'clock for your psychiatric evaluation. Doctor, Marcus Harrison will meet you in a private examination room. What happens in that room will determine everything. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered. You will, Laura said. It wasn't encouragement, it was certainty. Because the alternative is worse. She walked me through the setup. The camera would be positioned near his desk, disguised as a medical device he wouldn't question. Laura would be in the waiting room monitoring the feed on a tablet hidden in a grocery bag. If he said something incriminating, everything would be recorded. But he will talk, Laura said. Men like Dr. Harrison always do once they think they have nothing to lose. The strategy was elegant. I wasn't supposed to confront him. Instead, I would play confused, vulnerable, frightened. And then I would ask him 4 specific questions, ones designed to make him feel safe, to let him believe he was in control. Laura wrote them down. Doctor, am I losing my mind? Will Bridgewood help me? Why does my family want me there so badly? What's going to happen to me? These questions will make him feel like you're seeking his guidance, Laura explained. He'll want to reassure you. He'll want to prove how much he knows. And once he starts talking, he won't stop. That's the nature of people who've convinced themselves they're doing something good. We rehearsed for 20 minutes. Laura sat across from me, asking questions in Dr. Harrison's calm, clinical tone. I stumbled through my responses, at first my acting stiff and unconvincing. But with each run-through, something shifted. The fear became real. The confusion settled into my voice naturally. By the 5th attempt, I wasn't acting anymore, I was living it. Perfect, Laura said after the 6th rehearsal. Tomorrow, maintain this state. Don't try too hard. Let the confusion speak for itself. What if he doesn't confess? I asked. Then we call Detective Garrett. We give him the recordings, we already have the financial evidence, and we let the police do their job. Laura paused. But he will confess, Mrs. Sterling. Men like Dr. Harrison spend their entire lives convinced that what they're doing is reasonable. The only thing they fear is exposure. Once they think exposure is coming anyway, they surrender. They need someone to hear their justification. She leaned forward, her eyes holding mine. "He's going to make a mistake," she said, "and tomorrow afternoon he'll make it on camera." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. Because in less than 24 hours, everything would either fall into place or fall apart entirely. I heard the car pull into the driveway at 1:37 a.m. My heart rate spiked immediately, and I had to remind myself to breathe normally. Laura slipped into the shadows at the end of the hallway, watching but invisible. "We're home," Daniel's voice called out from the foyer. There was an edge to it, exhaustion mixed with something else. Guilt, maybe, or anticipation. I was in the living room when they entered, positioned on the sofa with a book I hadn't been reading. I changed into my nightgown, the silk one I usually wore. Every detail mattered now. Nothing could seem staged. Melissa appeared first radiant in a way I'd never seen before. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders, and her eyes held a brightness that made my skin crawl. She looked like someone who'd just won something precious. "Victoria, darling," she said, crossing the room. "You're still awake." "I couldn't sleep," I said, my voice small, truthful even if for the wrong reasons. "I was worried about you both." Daniel looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Sympathy or the beginning of pity? We decided to stay longer. The evening was wonderful. Melissa settled onto the arm of the sofa close enough that I could smell her perfume. "Actually," she said, her voice carrying that particular brightness, "we had a thought. Your health has been concerning us lately, Victoria. Little memory lapses, the confusion. We think it might be good to have you see someone, a professional." My throat tightened. This was it. The moment they made it official. "Dr. Marcus Harrison," Daniel added quietly. "He comes highly recommended. We were thinking tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. I forced my face to remain calm, though inside everything was screaming. 10 o'clock. So soon. They weren't wasting time anymore. "I don't think I need—" I began, but Melissa's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "Just a consultation," she said softly. "Peace of mind, that's all, for all of us." I looked at Daniel. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "His office is at Lexington Avenue Medical Center," Daniel continued. "It's very respected, very private. The doctor is excellent with cases like yours, cases like mine, as if my life had already been categorized, filed away into a diagnosis. If you don't want to go," Melissa added, "we understand. But we love you, Victoria. We just want to make sure you're getting the care you need." The words were chosen perfectly. Love wrapped around a threat. Care that would lead to Bridgewood Manor, to a room where I'd lose my voice and my control. I nodded slowly. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I repeated. "That's settled then," Daniel said, and I heard the relief in his voice. He'd been dreading this conversation. Now it was done. They left me there on the sofa, climbing the stairs to their bedroom. Through the crack in the living room door, I watched their shadows disappear down the hallway. Laura appeared at my side a moment later, her face grim. "We have less time than we thought," she whispered. I lay down on the sofa, still in my nightgown. The house was silent now, just the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, counting the minutes until dawn, knowing that every moment that passed was bringing me closer to the chair in Dr. Harrison's office, where everything would either be saved or lost forever. I woke on the sofa at 7:15 a.m., my neck stiff, my mind foggy from zero sleep. Laura was already in the kitchen, dressed in cleaning clothes with a mop and bucket. To anyone watching, she was just the hired help. To me, she was my lifeline. 10 o'clock, I whispered. 10 o'clock, she confirmed. "The camera is ready. I've scouted the building. There's a staff entrance we can use for positioning." I made coffee, grounds filter water. The normalcy was surreal. In 5 hours, my life would either change or end. Daniel came down around 8:30 a.m., freshly showered, wearing one of his expensive suits. He kissed my cheek absently. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Restlessly," I said. "I'm nervous about the appointment." He nodded. "It's just a consultation, nothing to worry about." At 9:00 a.m., Laura was in my room, checking the earpiece one final time, running through the questions I'd memorized. My palms were sweating, but with each repetition, the fear settled into something sharper. Focus, purpose. Then at 9:47 a.m., my phone rang. It was Daniel. Victoria? His voice was different, urgent. Yes, my stomach twisted. We need to move the appointment, he said. Dr. Harrison's morning is overbooked. He can see you at 2 o'clock instead of 10. Is that all right? 2 o'clock, 4 hours later. 4 hours less time to prepare. Victoria, Daniel pressed. Did you hear me? Yes, I managed. 2 o'clock is fine. Wonderful, he said. We'll leave at 1:30. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, then at Laura, whose face had gone carefully blank. They're accelerating, she said quietly. This is a move we didn't anticipate. Can we still do this? I asked. Laura moved to the window, looking out at the street below. We have to, she said. But everything happens faster now. I need to adjust the positioning at the medical center. The lunch hour traffic might work in our favor, more chaos, easier to move through unnoticed. The camera placement needs to change because the afternoon light will be different. She turned back to me, her expression hardening into determination. You still have 4 hours. We use every minute. Every second counts now. For the next hour, Laura and I ran through the questions again, adjusting my responses for the afternoon setting. My fear transformed into something colder, sharper. This was no longer theoretical. This was real, and it was accelerating. When Daniel left for his office around 11:00 a.m., telling me he'd pick me up at 1:15, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water. I couldn't quite bring myself to drink. Laura placed a hand on my shoulder. You're going to be extraordinary, she said. I looked up at her. How do you know? Because you have everything to lose, she said. And people like you, they fight hardest when the ground shifts beneath their feet. By 12:00 p.m., everything was ready. The camera had been reprogrammed. The questions had been refined. I was dressed in a soft gray cardigan and black pants, waiting for 1:15 p.m. 2 hours until my life changed. 2 hours until I walked into Dr. Harrison's office and either saved myself or lost everything. Dr. Marcus Harrison arrived exactly on time. He was mid-50s with polished confidence from years of telling vulnerable people what they wanted to hear. He wore an expensive suit and carried a leather portfolio. Nothing about him screamed fraud. That was precisely the point. Mrs. Sterling, he said, extending his hand. I'm Dr. Marcus Harrison. Your son mentioned memory concerns. I started letting the sentence drift. Yes, I think so. That's what they say. I'd rehearsed this with Laura, but now with him looking at me with practiced concern, it felt terrifyingly real. The fear I was performing merged with the fear I actually felt. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. The office was clinical, impersonal, designed to put patients at ease. Diplomas from prestigious universities, family photos, everything calculated to build trust. I'd like to ask you a few questions, Dr. Harrison said, pulling out a notebook. Just routine, nothing to worry about. He began with basic questions. My name, the current date. Who was the president? I answered correctly, but with just enough hesitation to plant doubt. Then he moved deeper. Tell me about your son's wedding, he said. When was that? I hesitated. His wedding, I repeated slowly. I'm not sure I remember that clearly. Think back, Dr. Harrison said gently. Your son Daniel got married. When did that happen? I let my eyes unfocus. I think I'm forgetting things. That's what they're worried about, isn't it? Dr. Harrison made a note, a small mark representing his conclusion forming. As he continued with his examination, I began to lose track of where performance ended and genuine anxiety began. He asked me to repeat numbers. He asked me to touch my finger to my nose. He took my blood pressure and shined a light in my eyes. Each gesture was clinical, each notation, another brick in the wall he was building around me. Have you been feeling confused about other things? He asked. Yes, I said. Time is strange. I'm not always sure where I am. More notes. The pen moved across the paper with the rhythm of a sentence being written. A sentence that would lock me away. Finally, after 20 minutes of examination, he leaned back in his chair. He was satisfied. He had his evidence. Mrs. Sterling, he said, his voice taking on concerned authority. I think it would be beneficial for you to receive more comprehensive care than can be provided at home. I felt my heart rate spike. This was the moment. Doctor, I asked, my voice trembling. Do I need to go into a hospital? Will that help me remember? Dr. Harrison looked at me, and he smiled. It was the smile of a man who believed himself invincible, the smile of someone who'd done this 100 times before and never faced consequences, the smile of a predator who thinks his prey doesn't even know it's being hunted. Yes, he said simply. I believe you do need to go into a hospital. I'd like to recommend a facility that specializes in your particular situation. Bridgewood Manor. He didn't need to say it. I knew. In that moment, with that single word, Dr. Marcus Harrison had confirmed everything. The bribe, the arrangement, the plan to have me committed to an institution where I could be medicated, confused, and eventually stripped of everything I owned. And every word of it was being recorded. I was beginning to wonder if the camera was actually recording when Dr. Harrison's demeanor shifted completely. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. For several seconds, he simply looked at me not as a doctor examining a patient, but as a man making a calculation. Mrs. Sterling, he said quietly, I want to be frank with you about what your family is planning. My heart stopped. Laura, wherever she was positioned outside, would be hearing every word. They want you declared incompetent. He continued, his voice clinical. Your husband Daniel is concerned about your mental state. His new wife, Melissa, shares those concerns. Together, they've asked me to document a psychiatric evaluation that will support their position with the court. I forced myself to look confused, frightened. They need control of your assets, he said. There was an edge now, something almost like satisfaction. $5 million is a significant sum, Mrs. Sterling. Your son needs access to that money. His new wife sees opportunity. But you won't actually do that, I said carefully. You're telling me this to warn me. Dr. Harrison laughed, a short, bitter sound. No, Mrs. Sterling. I'm telling you because I'm about to do exactly that. I'm about to sign papers declaring you mentally incompetent. You'll be transferred to Bridgewood Manor. The words hit like a physical blow. How much are they paying you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. $15,000 for the initial evaluation, he said. Plus annual commissions on your care. Bridgewood Manor pays referring physicians a percentage of placement fees. Your case is particularly valuable because your estate is substantial. They'll be billing your insurance, your family, and liquidating your assets over time. Everyone profits. You're criminals, I breathed. We're pragmatists, he corrected. Your family came to me with a problem. They needed their mother out of the way. I provided a solution. It's transactional, Mrs. Sterling, nothing personal. The papers are being prepared, he continued. Once they're signed, the process becomes irreversible. You'll be transferred to Bridgewood within 48 hours. Your family has been assured you'll receive excellent care, but that you won't be able to leave. Visitors will be limited. Communication with the outside world will be restricted. For your own safety, we tell families. To prevent confusion, to prevent escape attempts. Each word was a nail in a coffin I'd almost stepped into. Mrs. Sterling, he said, leaning forward slightly, I need you to understand something. Once those papers are signed, your life as you know it is over. You'll spend whatever remains of it in that facility believing you're insane, medicated into compliance, and entirely cut off from the world. I felt tears forming, though I wasn't sure if they were part of my performance anymore. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because, he said, I want you to know exactly what's happening. People cope better with their circumstances when they understand them completely. It's more humane in its way. It was the cruelest thing I'd heard him say yet. Outside, Laura would be hearing every word, the confession, the admission of conspiracy, the detail about the papers, the timeline. Everything we needed was being recorded in that little micro camera, and Dr. Harrison had no idea. He had just ensured his own destruction. The next 10 minutes changed everything. Dr. Marcus Harrison wasn't done talking. That's what Laura's recording device captured, first the sound of his breathing a little faster now, as if the dam had broken and there was no stopping what came next. I heard the shift in his voice through the tiny earpiece hidden in my cardigan pocket. I leaned forward slightly, my confused expression now mixed with something closer to genuine alarm. You want to know why I do this, Dr. Harrison said. It wasn't a question directed at me, it was confession, pure and unfiltered. There's a man named Victor Kensington. He runs Bridgewood Manor. Has for 20 years. Outside the exam room, Laura felt her pulse spike. Victor Kensington. She'd heard whispers of that name among the families who'd contacted her firm, families who'd lost people. Mr. Kensington's operation is well established. Dr. Harrison continued, and the clinical detachment was slipping from his voice, replaced by something darker. He's built a very profitable system, and yes, I benefit from it, but I'm not the architect. I'm just a facilitator. My hand trembled slightly. I kept my eyes downcast, still playing the part of a confused woman confronted with too much information, though inside I was absorbing every word into permanent memory. There are 12 verified cases at Bridgewood, Dr. Harrison said. Maybe more. Families don't talk about it. The insurance companies pay for the treatment. The families are told their loved ones are receiving specialized care. He paused. In a sense, they are specialized care in how to extract maximum profit from their conditions. 12. The number hung in the air like a death toll. The facility collects placement fees, monthly care costs that are triple what comparable facilities charge, medication markups of 400%, and therapeutic services that are billed but never rendered. Dr. Harrison's words came faster now, as if he couldn't stop them. The insurance companies are systematically overcharged. The families are given false hopes with treatment plans designed to keep residents institutionalized and dependent. Bridgewood profits at every stage. Through the speaker, I could hear him stand pace a few steps. And for my part in this, Dr. Harrison said, I receive $15,000 per placement I authorize, plus an annual commission on every patient I refer to Bridgewood. Last year alone, that came to $75,000. The numbers made my head swim. $75,000 every single year, just for signing his name. Why would I walk away from that? Dr. Harrison asked, his voice almost pleading now. Why would any doctor, when it's this profitable, this easy, this systematic? Because it's murder, I heard myself say. My voice was quiet, fractured, still performing, but something in my delivery carried the weight of truth. Dr. Harrison stopped pacing. For a moment, there was only silence. Not murder, he corrected, and I could hear the rationalization, the self-deception that allows powerful men to sleep at night. It's a service. Families need help. Insurance companies have money. I have expertise. Victor has a facility. Everyone benefits. Everyone except the patients, I thought. There's one more thing you should know, Dr. Harrison said, and his voice dropped to something almost conspiratorial. Victor Kensington doesn't work alone. There's a network. Other facilities, other doctors, other families paying in. This isn't a single operation. It's been operating for decades. He didn't finish the sentence. The examination room door suddenly swung open. Laura stepped into the examination room with the kind of presence that fills a space. She wore the same cleaning clothes from earlier, but everything about her had changed. The confusion was gone. In its place was absolute certainty. Dr. Marcus Harrison looked up from his desk, and I watched the color drain from his face. Dr. Harrison. Laura said, her voice steady and professional. I'm a licensed private investigator. My name is Laura Bennett. Everything you've said in this room for the past 30 minutes has been recorded. Audio and video. She held up the eyeglass frames. The micro camera glinted under the fluorescent lights. I saw the moment he understood. He'd been confessing to a stranger, not a confused elderly woman. That every admission Victor Kensington, the 12 cases, the $75,000 a year, had been captured in crystal clarity. This is illegal, he said, his voice shaking. Recording without consent is illegal in this state. New York is a one-party consent state, Laura replied calmly. Mrs. Sterling consented to being recorded. That's all that matters legally. He looked at me, then really looked at me for the first time. And I saw the moment he understood that I wasn't Victoria Sterling confused elderly patient. I was someone else entirely. You set me up, he breathed. Yes, I said. My voice was steady now. I did. I stood up. The woman he'd been speaking to, vulnerable, frightened, compliant, had been a performance. The real Victoria Sterling was standing in front of him now, and she was furious. "You are going to destroy my life," I said quietly. "You were going to sign papers that would have me locked away, medicated into compliance, cut off from the world, and you were going to profit from it." Dr. Harrison stood abruptly, his chair scraping backward. "I'm calling my attorney," he said. "You have no right to hold me here." He moved toward the door, but Laura stepped sideways, positioning herself between him and the exit. "The door stays closed," Laura said, "for now. You can't keep me here," Harrison said, his voice rising. "This is false imprisonment. My lawyer will have you arrested, both of you." "Your lawyer can't help you with what we have," Laura said. She pulled out her phone, showing him the recording app, the timeline of everything he'd said. 12 verified cases. Victor Kensington. The insurance fraud. The medication markups. The annual commissions. You've given us everything we need. I watched him process this, the realization that there was no way out, no argument he could make that would erase what had just happened in this room. "I want my lawyer," he repeated, but the fight had gone out of him. He slumped back into his chair, looking suddenly smaller than he had before. "You'll get your lawyer," Laura said. "But first you need to understand something. You're not dealing with a confused family member anymore. You're dealing with people who have recordings, financial documents, and the full cooperation of the New York Police Department." As if on cue, there was a soft knock at the examination room door. Laura didn't move. "He's ready for you," she called out. The door opened and Detective James Garrett stepped inside. He was tall, mid-50s, with the kind of calm presence that comes from 20 years in law enforcement. Behind him stood 2 uniformed officers. "Dr. Marcus Harrison," Garrett said, pulling out his badge. "You're under arrest for fraud, insurance conspiracy, and unlicensed practice of psychiatry. If you're still following along with us, we are deeply grateful for your loyalty. Just a quick reminder, while Victoria Sterling and the characters in this story are fictional, the issues surrounding elder abuse and medical corruption are rooted in real events happening every single day. The specific details about her family and the conspiracy have been reimagined for storytelling purposes. Please continue watching at whatever comfort level feels right for you." Detective Garrett didn't hesitate. He nodded to the officers, and within seconds, Dr. Marcus Harrison was being advised of his rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be provided to you." I watched Dr. Harrison's face crumble. The composed physician who'd been confessing just minutes ago was now confronted with the full weight of those confessions having legal consequence. This wasn't hypothetical anymore. This was real. "I understand," Dr. Harrison said quietly. "Do you waive your right to an attorney?" Garrett asked. "Do you want to speak without legal representation?" I expected him to refuse, to demand a lawyer immediately. But something in Dr. Harrison had broken during the confrontation with Laura. "I'll talk," he said. "I want to talk." Garrett nodded, and one of the officers produced a voice recorder. Everything would be documented. "Tell me about the falsified psychiatric records," Garrett said, settling into the chair. "How many patients?" Dr. Harrison looked at his hands. 17, over the past 6 years. 17. 17 people declared incompetent based on his lies. "And Victor Kensington," Garrett continued. "Tell me about your arrangement." "He approached me 5 years ago," Dr. Harrison said, his voice steady now. "He said he had Bridgewood Manor and needed doctors willing to refer patients. He offered $15,000 per referral, plus ongoing commissions based on length of stay. And you accepted." "I accepted. Did you know patients at Bridgewood were being abused?" Dr. Harrison closed his eyes. "I suspected. I didn't want to know for certain. It's easier to pretend you don't know something than to know it and be complicit." "That's not how law works," Garrett said coldly. For the next several minutes, Garrett extracted details, names of patients, dates of evaluations, amounts paid. By the time he finished, Dr. Harrison had constructed a comprehensive confession that would stand up in court implicating Victor Kensington, Bridgewood Manor, and everyone in the network. It was devastating. It was thorough. It was exactly what we needed. Laura stepped into the hallway, and I heard her voice as she made a call, coordinating the next phase. making sure Daniel and Melissa wouldn't have warning, wouldn't have time to run. When she returned, she caught my eye and nodded. Everything was in motion. Garrett stood up, gesturing to the officers. Dr. Marcus Harrison, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, patient abuse facilitation, and insurance fraud. As they led him out, his hands cuffed behind his back, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, the case wasn't finished, but a sense of momentum, of justice beginning to move slowly but inevitably toward those who'd orchestrated this. Detective Garrett paused at the doorway, addressing Laura formally. We'll move on the residence at 5th Avenue at 3:30 p.m. We'll arrest Daniel and Melissa Sterling there. You'll need to provide the court with all recordings and evidence. Already prepared, Laura said. Garrett looked at me, and there was something in his expression that might have been respect. You did good work, Mrs. Sterling. Not many people would have had the courage to do what you did. Laura had already called Detective Garrett hours before this moment. He'd been listening to everything, building the case brick by brick. Now the net was closing in on the people who'd tried to destroy me. Garrett leaned against the doorframe. We have just over an hour, he said quietly. We'll arrest them at 3:30 p.m. They don't have a chance to run. The police arrived at exactly 3:30 p.m. I was upstairs when I heard the firm knock on the front door. Through my window, I saw Detective Garrett on the steps with uniformed officers. 3 unmarked cars lined 5th Avenue. This was it. I heard Daniel's confused voice. Who is it? His tone changed when Garrett introduced himself and produced the warrant. I descended quietly, remaining unseen at the top of the stairs, where I could see into the foyer below. Daniel stood in the entrance hall, his face draining of color as he read the warrant. Behind him, Melissa appeared from the living room. For just a moment, I saw the mask slip, saw the pure predator underneath. What is this about? Melissa demanded, her voice sharp. We have done nothing illegal. We have a warrant to search these premises, Garrett said calmly, and to arrest Daniel Sterling and Melissa Sterling on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and attempted financial exploitation. That's absurd, Melissa said. I don't know what lies. We have recordings, Garrett interrupted. We have financial documents. We have the testimony of Dr. Marcus Harrison, who has already confessed. I watched Daniel's face go white. The officers moved through the house systematically. I heard drawers opening and the study papers being gathered. An officer emerged carrying a laptop. Another held a folder thick with documents. A third came down from upstairs with several prescription bottles, the medication that had been going into my soup. Melissa's composure cracked. You can't just, those are prescribed medications. By a doctor you paid to falsify her psychiatric evaluation, Garrett said. By a doctor who's already given us a complete statement. Daniel tried to speak. Detective, I think there's been a misunderstanding. If Dr. Harrison said, Daniel Sterling. Garrett began reading him his rights. You have the right to remain silent. I gripped the banister as my son listened to the words that would define the next several years of his life. He looked devastated, confused. Melissa remained defiant. When an officer approached with handcuffs, she pulled away. Don't touch me. I want my lawyer. I want my lawyer right now. You'll have your lawyer, Garrett said, after processing. The handcuffs went on, for both of them. Daniel didn't resist. He stood quietly as the officer secured the cuffs, and for just a moment he looked up. His eyes searched the staircase as if he somehow knew I was there. Our eyes met. I saw the moment he understood. Understood that it wasn't a misunderstanding. Understood that I had orchestrated this. That his own mother had been the investigator, the actress, the architect of his downfall. His face crumpled. Mom, he said. And it was the saddest single word I'd ever heard. Not a question, not a plea. Just a statement of everything broken between us. The officer placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him toward the door. Melissa was already being escorted out, still protesting, still demanding her lawyer. I watched them leave, watched the cars pull away from 5th Avenue, watched the street return to normal as if my family hadn't just been destroyed by the truth. Laura appeared in the doorway below, looking up at me. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Everything we'd planned for had come to pass. But standing there at the window, watching the cars disappear into the Manhattan traffic, I wondered if justice always had to cost this much. The courtroom was packed. I hadn't expected so many people. Media lined the gallery with cameras. Spectators filled every seat. This was a public reckoning elderly woman targeted by her own son and his wife, wealthy Fifth Avenue family exposed for conspiracy and fraud. Judge Thomas Richardson entered and everyone rose. He was in his 60s with silver hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades administering justice. When his eyes scanned the gallery, there was only authority. My attorney Barbara Sinclair caught my eye and nodded slightly. Everything was ready. The prosecution called Dr. Hartwell first a medical expert in psychiatric pharmaceuticals. He testified about the medication found in my system, about how it mimicked dementia when administered in controlled doses, about how the timeline of administration matched my supposed mental deterioration perfectly. Mrs. Sterling was never mentally incompetent, Dr. Hartwell said directly to the judge. She was being systematically poisoned with antipsychotic medications to create the appearance of cognitive decline. Daniel's face went pale. Melissa remained composed, but I saw her jaw tighten. Patricia Winters took the stand next. She spoke about our friendship, about my mental acuity before this began, about the day she'd noticed something wrong. Victoria was sharp as a tack, she said. I knew something was wrong. Then the recordings played. Dr. Harrison's voice filled the courtroom confessing everything. The $15,000, the 12 verified cases, the abuse, the systematic exploitation. Every word was crystal clear and undeniable. I watched Daniel listen, watched him realize his co-conspirator had given everything up. There was no escape now. Financial documents followed. Bank statements showing transfers from Victor Kensington to Dr. Marcus Harrison to Daniel's account. Emails between Melissa and Daniel discussing the timeline, the care facility, the inheritance. Each document was more damning than the last. The defense attempted to argue that Daniel had been manipulated by Melissa, that he hadn't fully understood the scope of what was happening. But there was no denying the evidence. After brief closing arguments, Judge Richardson took less than an hour to deliberate. When he returned, the courtroom fell silent. He looked at Daniel first. Daniel Sterling on the charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and attempted financial exploitation. I find you guilty on all counts. I sentence you to 18 years in prison. Daniel closed his eyes. 18 years, nearly 2 decades gone. Then the judge looked at Melissa. Melissa Sterling on the charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, attempted financial exploitation, and racketeering. I find you guilty on all counts. I sentence you to 22 years in prison. Melissa's expression didn't change. Dr. Marcus Harrison tried in absentia. I find you guilty on all charges. I sentence you to 25 years in prison. It was over. As bailiffs moved to escort Daniel and Melissa from the courtroom, Melissa turned. Her eyes found mine in the gallery, and she smiled, not a smile of defeat, but something colder, something that promised this wasn't finished. She mouthed the words clearly, deliberately, so I would understand, I will come back, Victoria. Then the guards moved her toward the door, and I realized that the trial was finished, but the threat was far from over. Victor Kensington was arrested 3 weeks after Melissa's sentencing. The evidence was overwhelming: financial records, patient files, correspondence with Dr. Marcus Harrison, and dozens of corrupt medical professionals. The network that had seemed so invulnerable crumbled under the weight of official investigation. Bridgewood Manor closed permanently. Detective Garrett called to inform me that 12 residents had been rescued from the facility. 12 people who'd been declared incompetent, institutionalized, and exploited for years. Some had families, others had no one. The civil settlement came through 4 months after the trial, $2 million. The defendants' lawyers had no defense left. The evidence was too clear, the conspiracy too documented. I didn't keep it. I established the Elderly Advocacy and Protection Fund. I worked with lawyers, social workers, and medical professionals to create assistance for elderly people who'd been exploited or targeted by family members seeking financial gain. Some Bridgewood victims became the first recipients. Others came from across the country, people who'd experienced similar betrayals. 3 months after sentencing, Laura came to my office with a proposal. "We should make this permanent," she said, setting down a leather portfolio. "The investigation, the advocacy, the cases." I looked at this woman who'd saved my life, who'd become something like a sister to me. "What do you mean?" "We start a company," Laura said. "Investigation and advocacy. We take cases like yours. We find people being exploited by the system, by their families, by corrupt professionals. We bring them justice." Within 6 weeks, Martinez Whitmore Investigation and Advocacy was officially registered as a New York business. Laura had chosen the name carefully, Martinez, after her grandmother, Whitmore, after my maiden name. 2 women, 2 families, 1 mission. We hired a small staff of former detectives, medical professionals, and social workers. Within our first year, we had taken on multiple cases. Some were elder exploitation. Others involved vulnerable adults. A few involved Bridgewood-type operations in other states, a network of corruption so extensive that I wondered how many victims existed across America. Each case felt personal. Each victim's face became real to me in a way that the abstract concept of justice never could. I visited Daniel 9 months after his sentencing. Prison had already changed him. He looked older, diminished, as if something essential had been extracted. When they brought him to the visiting room, he sat across from me, the phone barrier between us. "Mom," he said, "I don't expect you to forgive me." "I know," I said. "I was weak," he continued. "Melissa manipulated me, but that's not an excuse. I knew what we were doing was wrong. I just didn't care enough to stop." I looked at my son, the man he'd become, the choices he'd made, the consequences he was now facing. "You have a lot of years ahead of you," I said quietly. "Years to think about what you did, years to understand why it was wrong. That's your punishment, and that's your opportunity." He nodded slowly, and we sat in silence for the rest of the visit. When I left Sing Sing that day, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness that would take time, but acceptance. Acceptance that my son had made terrible choices, that he was suffering the consequences, and that I had to continue living my life regardless. Laura was waiting in the parking lot. "How was it?" she asked. "Hard," I said, "but necessary." She nodded. "We have a new case. Elder abuse in New Jersey. The family's fighting it, but the evidence is there." I looked at her, and I felt something like joy. Not the happiness of ignorance, but the deep satisfaction of purposeful work. "Let's go get them," I said. The New Jersey case had been our first major win. It was the case that proved our method worked on a larger scale, the one that gave us confidence to expand beyond New York. But that was 5 years ago. Since then, we'd learned that the pattern wasn't regional. It was systemic. It appeared in every state, every neighborhood, every economic bracket. Eleanor Hartwell was case number 47. 73 years old, living in a Brooklyn Heights apartment that overlooked the bridge, she'd been systematically isolated by her daughter-in-law, Margaret. "She controls my medications, my money, my entire life." Eleanor had said during our consultation, her voice trembling, but her eyes clear. It was a story I'd heard before. The pattern was always the same: isolation, medication, manipulation, financial exploitation. Laura and I knew what needed to happen. 2 weeks later, I was back in Eleanor's apartment wearing the same carefully crafted confusion I'd perfected over 5 years. The micro camera was disguised as a hearing aid. Laura waited in the hallway with recording equipment. Margaret arrived at 2 p.m., and the confrontation unfolded like a script we'd performed countless times. "You took your morning medication already," Margaret said. "Why are you asking for it again?" "I don't remember," I said softly. "I'm so confused." And Margaret, believing she was alone with a confused elderly woman, explained exactly how she'd been doctoring Eleanor's medication, how she'd manipulated Eleanor's son, how she'd diverted funds into her own account. Every word was recorded. By 4 p.m., police had arrived. By 5 p.m., Margaret was arrested. By 6 p.m., medical professionals confirmed Eleanor's cognitive function was completely intact. The gratitude in Eleanor's eyes was something I'd never become numb to. It never got old. "How can I ever thank you?" Eleanor asked, tears streaming down her face. "By living your life," I said. "By enjoying your freedom." Laura and I took the subway back into Manhattan that evening. We didn't need to talk. The work spoke for itself. 47 cases, 47 victims rescued, 47 perpetrators facing justice. I thought about Daniel sometimes. He was halfway through his 18-year sentence, now locked in a cell reflecting on choices he'd made. Melissa would be eligible for parole soon, but Eleanor Hartwell was free, and the next person who called would be free too. That's what we do now. We answer phones. We listen to stories of betrayal and abuse. We take cases that the system ignores and fight for them with everything we have. I arrived at my apartment that night and stood at the window looking out at the city lights. 5 years ago, I'd been a victim of a conspiracy. Now I was an investigator, an advocate, a voice for people who'd lost theirs. My phone buzzed, a new email, another case, another person in need. Every day I receive calls from people who need help, people who've been betrayed by their families, exploited by the system, targeted by predators who thought they were easy victims. And every day I say yes, because I understand what it means to be betrayed. I understand having your life stolen, your choices taken away, your voice silenced. And I will never let that happen to anyone else if I can help it. This is my life now. This is my purpose. This is my answer to betrayal. I will not stop. I cannot stop. Because every person I save is a person who gets their life back. Every perpetrator brought to justice is a wrong made right. Every family I help is a piece of the world healed. Every day I receive calls from someone who needs me. And I will not stop. When I look back at my life, the woman I was, the choices my family made, the conspiracy that nearly destroyed me, I realize this isn't just my story. It's a warning. Family drama stories often end in heartbreak, but mine ended in courtrooms and prison sentences. And I don't say that with pride. I say it as a woman who watched her own son betray her, who saw greed and manipulation tear apart everything we'd built. Don't be like me. Don't wait until it's too late to see the warning signs. Don't ignore the small lies that grow into bigger ones. Don't trust blindly. God gave us instinct for a reason. When something feels wrong, it probably is. The elderly are vulnerable. Grandma's stories shouldn't be about exploitation and abandonment. They should be about wisdom, love, and protection. But across America, thousands of grandmothers are being targeted by people they trusted. These grandma stories are becoming nightmare stories because we've failed to protect our elders. Here's what I've learned. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Speak up. Most importantly, love your parents and grandparents enough to watch over them, not exploit them. God doesn't protect us from betrayal. He equips us to survive it and help others do the same. That's what I do now. Every call I receive is a family drama stories that I can help rewrite. Every victim I save is proof that justice exists for those willing to fight for it. The family drama stories I've witnessed through Martinez Whitmore taught me that monsters don't always look like monsters. They wear suits. They say, "I love you." They call themselves family. The most heartbreaking grandma stories are the ones where no one intervened until it was almost too late. But God gave us courage to stand against them. This is my life now. This is my answer to betrayal. If you're reading this and recognizing your own situation, don't wait. Don't hope it will get better. Reach out. Tell someone. You deserve to live free, not imprisoned by people claiming to love you. I will not stop fighting. Neither should you. Thank you for following Victoria's complete story. If you found this meaningful, please comment and subscribe for more stories about justice, resilience, and standing up for the vulnerable. Important note, while the specific events are fictional, the real-world crisis of elder exploitation demands our attention. If you recognize yourself or a loved one in this story, please don't hesitate to reach out for help. Resources are available, and you deserve support.